Hello and welcome to tonight's webinar, New Directions, Making Sense of Me and My MS Diagnosis. Thank you for joining us. My name is Susan and I will be the operator for tonight's webinar. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment and share with you a few features of the webinar platform. For this webinar, attendees will be in listen-only mode. At any time, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you have. If you need technical assistance, please submit your request under the Tech Support tab in the window on the right-hand side of your computer screen. If you wish to submit a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A window on the right-hand side of your computer screen. Once you type your question, please be sure to press Enter to submit your question. We will try to answer these questions during the Q&A portion of the webinar, but if an in-depth answer is needed or we run out of time, we will try to answer it at a later time via email. We do capture all questions. We are joined today by our moderator, Marie Legrand, from the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America, and our speakers today are Dr. Evelyn Hunter, Cynthia, and Tyler. At this time, I would like to turn the microphone over to our moderator, Marie, for opening remarks.
Hello and welcome to MSAA's live webinar, Making Sense of Me and My MS Diagnosis. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us. As mentioned, I am Marie Legrand, Director of Education, Healthcare Relations, and Grant Management for MSAA, and your host for the program this evening. Now, before we begin our program, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Genentech and Johnson & Johnson for making this program possible through educational funding. Please make sure to visit our virtual display hall, which is listed in the chat box on your screen along with the link. This online resource details some of the products and services that are offered by our selection of sponsors, and we would like to thank Biogen, Genentech, and Sanofi Genzyme for taking part in this new virtual opportunity. Now, we are extremely grateful to have Dr. Evelyn Hunter with us, who will be presenting on this important topic, along with MS community members, Tyler and Cynthia. We are so pleased to bring you this program that will explore the stages of grief following an MS diagnosis, the impact that this diagnosis can have on one's identity, as well as what this diagnosis can mean for a Black person living with MS. This program is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute as formal recommendations. Please do speak with your doctor or healthcare provider if you have any questions or concerns. Now, as you may know, MSAA is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to improving lives today for the MS community. Some of our free services include a national helpline, equipment and cooling products, MRI funding, an online community, webinars, and many more free programs available to people living with MS all across the country. Please do visit our website to experience our COVID-19 and MS Pathfinder tool, which provides ongoing updates and resources on the coronavirus. Also, please know that MSAA has expanded our helpline hours to 8 p.m. Eastern between Mondays and Thursdays. Now, to learn more about these and all of the ways in which MSAA improved lives today, please visit our website at mymsaa.org, or you can also call us at 1-800-532-7667. Throughout tonight's program, you will have the opportunity to ask questions by typing them into the chat box. We do encourage you to submit questions throughout the program, and we'll do our very best to answer your questions during the panel discussion of tonight's program. At the end of the program, we ask that you please complete a brief survey. Your feedback is extremely important and will help us in developing future programming and content. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for this evening, Dr. Evelyn Hunter. Dr. Hunter is a licensed psychologist and assistant professor of counseling psychology at Auburn University, working in the Department of Special Education, Rehabilitation, and Counseling. She has a passion for connecting aspects of mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. I will now turn it over to Dr. Hunter. Dr. Hunter, welcome. Dr. Hunter, I believe you're muted.
Apologies all.
There you go.
Thank you, Marie, and for having me today, and thank you, Tyler and Cynthia, for joining me on this program. Let's talk a little bit about processing a new diagnosis of MS, and put a name to some of the feelings that may naturally come up. Grief is a normal reaction to a new diagnosis of MS or any other chronic illness. But what does it mean to grieve? What does that look like? That's what we'll talk a little bit about today. Next slide. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is a psychiatrist who first named the 5 stages of grief, and we still rely on these really heavily to understand the different phases that we may experience when we're grieving. She outlined those phases as denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And what we'll be talking about today is how those phases might look for us individually, and sort of what are some ways we can address the phases of grief. Let's look at the next slide. So oftentimes we think of the impact of an MS diagnosis as putting us first into a stage of denial, and that often can lead to disbelief, trouble believing that the diagnosis is true. And this is often common for MS patients because often our diagnoses are very difficult to come to. And so some folks are diagnosed very early on after experiencing symptoms. Others go a decade before they receive their final diagnosis of MS. And so it can be very common to experience denial in that context. Anger and frustration is also another common experience. Why did this happen to me? Really feeling frustrated at, imagining the ways that life may be different from what you envisioned. And bargaining can also follow that. And so bargaining is really when we struggle to figure out, find some sort of meaning in what's happened in terms of being diagnosed with MS, and also often seeking both what we can do differently in our present, but I also see many clients reach toward the past. So what if I had done something differently? What if, I had changed this? What if I hadn't moved here? And so that bargaining phase can look like really a lot of wrestling in our minds. Depression is also a very common stage of grief. You may feel overwhelmed, helpless, irritable. Oftentimes we don't associate our irritability or our hostility with depression, but that can be a sign of depression. And one of the difficult pieces of depression is that oftentimes the symptoms of depression can also mirror our symptoms of MS. So for instance, fatigue can be a symptom of our MS, but really having hypersomnia or wanting to sleep all day is also a symptom of depression. Or on some of us have difficulty sleeping, and so insomnia can also be a symptom of depression. And then finally, acceptance is what we often consider the final stage of grief, and we'll talk a little bit about how final the final stage of grief is. But that's where we sort of learn to live with MS and start to feel more positive about the future, and really hold MS in an overall context. Let's take a look at the next slide. Now, the reality is that although we talk about the stages of grief in this linear fashion, it doesn't always happen that way. The best way I know to think about grief, and the best way that I've heard grief described is in waves of grief. So if you think about yourself right now, if you went to an ocean and you sat in the sand, right where the water and the beach meet, and you sat down and you stayed there for a long period of time, let's say 24 hours or 48 hours, the waves would look different at different times of that day across that period. So there may be some times when the tide gets really high and the waves get really rough. And when they meet you in the sand at that beach, they're knocking you over, they're pulling you farther out. You feel like you're going deeper into the ocean. There may be other times when the tide gets really low and those waves are not meeting you at the beach at all. You're completely dry. And other times when the waves are really gentle and you feel them rush up on your feet, but they're not impacting you, they're not bothering you, they're not moving you. You just notice them there. And that's really the way we can think about grief, that oftentimes grief comes in waves and those waves look different. And our goal is really to be non-judgmental about the way that grief is impacting us in the moment and be able to notice it and then address it if we need to. The stages of grief often, because they are waves, aren't linear. And so it may be that you experience denial and then some depression, and then you go back to some anger, and maybe you have some acceptance, but then another wave of grief hits you later on, because of a change in your MS diagnosis or a change in your life. And so again, the stages of grief are unique to every person. And the key is to be non-judgmental about the way your journey looks. Let's go to the next slide. So, how do we notice grief then? Like, how do I know if I'm grieving, if I'm experiencing a stage of grief, and how do I recognize it? Well, oftentimes, many of us don't notice our emotions first, but instead we notice our thoughts. And so, one question that may be helpful to ask yourself are, what are the thoughts? What do my thoughts sound like? And what stage of grief does that match? If it does match a stage of grief, that may be one way to identify. So in a denial phase of grief, you may be thinking to yourself, not me, it can't be true, it's not that bad. In an anger phase, those thoughts may sound like, why me? This is not fair. Oftentimes in an anger phase, folks, again, reach back, to say, I've lived this really, healthy life. I've really taken care of myself. How is this happening to me? Or alternatively, I haven't taken that great care of myself. And, this is not fair. It's my fault. Again, what do those thoughts sound like? Let's take a look at the next slide. In a bargaining phase, again, you may be thinking, what if I did this? Or what if I had done that? What if I found out about my diagnosis sooner? What if I chose, this DMT over that DMT? What if I had not, done, pursued this aspect of treatment? And so bargaining, there's a lot of questioning of what if. And that is how you may notice that you're in that phase of grief. In depression, things feel overwhelming. You may be thinking, I'm sad, this is too much, I can't handle this, this is too heavy. And so if you're having those thoughts, you may be in a depression phase of grief. Let's take a look at the next slide. And so it can be difficult to recognize that our feelings and our thoughts are grief, but it's really important that you do so that you can reach out to get the appropriate support and care. Sometimes mourning what life looks like or how you envision life in the future is really normal. And anticipatory grief is a normal part of experiencing MS diagnosis. So being uncertain about what's to come in the context of MS. So knowing that these things are normal, knowing that we can approach them non-judgmentally, and then reaching for support. Let's look at the next slide. So what does support look like if I'm going through grief? There are a number of resources. Some have been shared with you today. There are treatments that can help, especially in the context of anger, depression, irritability, etc. Managing your symptoms and being proactive in your health can really help you shift outside of the stages of grief. And then also some of us do a little bit too much research. And so being careful about what we read, really being thoughtful about the information we take in, whether or not we need to take that information in, and how we're using it to help us, you know? So sometimes reading all of the gloom and doom is not going to be helpful. Sometimes we need to think about, what information do I need to make the best decisions for my health? And then support groups, counseling or family counseling, especially with therapists who understand MS or chronic illness, and how to navigate symptoms of depression in that context, leaning on our loved ones, and then mindfulness, which is how a technique that therapists can also help you learn, where we can stop and bring ourselves back into the present moment and be really appreciative of what's happening in our present. Go ahead to the next part of our presentation today, which is a little bit about our personal identity and MS. So how do we identify? First, what is identity? If identity is the way that you describe yourself. So if I gave you these index cards and I said, write down who you are on these index cards, what would you include? So for me, I would probably include that I'm a Black woman, I'm a mother, I'm a psychologist. So those really important pieces of the way I define myself make up my identity. Let's look at the next slide. Now, we all have many identities, like I just shared. And the question is, how does your MS diagnosis play a role in your identity? And it's different for all of us. Let's take a look at the different ways MS can play a role in our identities. Now, some patients with MS identify in what I call a backpack identity, okay? So that means, these patients carry their MS diagnosis with them, but it's not a part of who they are. It's just something that they carry with them. And they also are able to put the backpack down or pick it up. Now, no matter how you identify with regard to your MS, there are healthy and unhealthy ways to do so. So someone who has a really healthy backpack identity is going to be able to function in the ways in their identities that are really important to them. When they put their MS backpack down, they'll do it at appropriate times. When they need to pick their MS backpack up, they'll pick it up at appropriate times. However, there's also an unhealthy way to engage a backpack identity with your MS. And so folks who engage an unhealthy way with the backpack identity may struggle to pick the backpack up when they need to, or may allow the backpack to feel heavy. So they're carrying MS like a weight. And so if you're noticing you have a backpack identity with your MS, and it feels like a weight, that may not be the best way to think about MS and your identity for you. Let's go to the next way we can identify. Now, some folks with MS identify with their MS like a distant relative. So those cousins or those distant cousins that you don't see or you only see at family reunions. Some folks engage their MS identity in this way. And so when MS is not there, it's out of sight and out of mind until you see them the next time. MS is only present when it's present. And of course, for folks who engage with a distant relative identity, there is a healthy way and an unhealthy way to do so. So for healthy folks, when MS is there, the adjustments are made at having MS in the home, visiting as a relative. Folks do what they need to do in terms of treatment and supportive care. And when MS is gone, they find purpose, passion, and functioning in the context of their lives and their identities that are not related to MS. But on the unhealthy side, if anybody has had family drama where those distant relatives, you don't see them because there's tension or there's hostility, and anytime they show up, there's drama. If you're engaging your MS identity as a distant relative in that way, where there's tension and stress and anxiety when MS shows up, then again, that's not the healthiest way to integrate in that identity. So again, there's a healthy way and an unhealthy way. And the next slide. And then the final way that folks may incorporate their MS identity is what we call an integrated MS identity. And this is one of those situations where MS is a part of your identity. It's one of the things you would write down on that index card as one part of who you are. And your identity is shifting and changing in the context of the way you understand yourself in MS. And again, folks with a really healthy MS integrated identity, you see them showing up for education programs, advocating. You see them taking part in understanding MS and moving the science forward, really connecting with support groups. And that's a really healthy integrated identity. And then there are unhealthy ways to have an integrative identity. And that really looks like when MS becomes the sole salient piece of your identity. And the other ways that were important that you identify, for instance, in your family or your race or ethnicity or your religion, things that were important before are no longer important. And that is not the healthiest way to have an integrated MS identity. So the important thing about a backpack, a distant relative, or an integrated MS identity is not which one you fit in, but if you fit in sort of a healthy form of functioning. Let's go to the next slide. What we know is that after an MS diagnosis, it does become incorporated into our self-identity in some way over time. Oftentimes we start, especially when we're in that grief process, where MS is pretty compartmentalized and it's really separate from us, but over time and with supportive care, MS does become a part of our overall self-identity, and it can positively impact the way we engage the world. All right, well, I am going to have Marie come back on so she can so we can hear from Tyler and Cynthia. Really excited about that.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Hunter. Our next speaker for this evening is Tyler. Diagnosed in his junior year of college, Tyler became the first individual to play Division I college football with MS and now travels the country as a professional, outstanding speaker. Welcome, Tyler.
Hey Marie, thank you so very much. Good evening to everyone. I was still here taking notes because Dr. Hunter was spitting some serious fire over the microphone. So thank you, Dr. Hunter, as well. Um, for me, MS came my direction. I was not prepared for it like so many other people, but I think it was my mother who sat me down and helped me to understand that she was like, son, sometimes like storms in life aren't coming your way to disrupt your path, but instead they're coming to clear a new path. And I think when she said that, it caused my mind to literally be blown. And I looked at multiple sclerosis as a form of my own personal activism. So many people are always navigating the way of the world, trying to look to try to fit in somewhere. And multiple sclerosis became a part of that identity, and it became my activism. It was a way for me to discover my voice. The thing that I yearned for the most amongst my diagnosis when I was 21 years old was that I needed another Black male to come and speak hope, life, and encouragement into my life, right? Somebody who had MS that looked like me, who would be that fatherly figure, that brotherly love figure. And I never found that. And so I looked at that person staring back at me in the mirror and I said, Tyler, you got to be that person. You have to find a way to let your story manifest, let your story be told in such a way so that another person of color won't be sitting in the same position that you are sitting in. I did not know that the gift was going to be done through words. I have stage fright all my life. This getting on the microphone was not who I wanted myself to be. That's not what I figured that I was designed to be. But I was obedient to the things that MS was actually opening up my life to. Football was just a byproduct of that. Football was just a talent. Multiple sclerosis actually revealed who I really and truly am as a man, which was a gift and a power of words. That's why I always tell people you always have to be willing to find a new approach to the dreams that you have. It may not always go the way that you designed. And a lot of us have lost certain things because of MS. But that does not mean your dreams have to die. You just have to navigate and find a new approach as to how you are going to still make that thing active. And because I was obedient, because I just wanted to be a difference maker and a servant in all of this, the microphone was something that set me free. The microphone granted me the opportunity to go and travel and do all these things and have a radio show. But it was really just being obedient and being a servant. And the project that I'm working on now to try to shed light more so of what multiple sclerosis looks like in our community was I reverted back to who I am as a man. I reverted back to my childhood. What makes you happy, Tyler? What is something that makes you happy that MS cannot take away from you? And it is my love of reading and comic books, y'all. So what did I do? I decided to take an MS diagnosis and say, take my MS diagnosis and let's put it in the form of a comic book through photography and pictures. And let's walk people through what a diagnosis looks like in a fun-loving way. Y'all, we lost the Black Panther this year. My man Chadwick Boseman. But what I noticed is, I love the fact that more and more people are reading comic books. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take something that is called a photo novella in Latino culture, and I'm going to walk them through what my multiple sclerosis diagnosis looked like. What questions did I have for a doctor? What type of challenges did I experience? What are some facts that you need to know about multiple sclerosis so that it can help other people feel like you can? And in doing those things, it sets me free. The more and more you actually open up and talk about your diagnosis, you will recognize that there's therapy. Look, there is therapy in the process. Even if you just talk to one person about what it is that you have, you'll find that there is relief. There's a sense of love. There's a sense of weight lifted off of your shoulders because you are internalizing, you are keeping so much in you, and that's building the stress up in your life. Those are the things that I set myself free from. When I noticed that feeling, it allowed me to create products or projects like what I have. So if you guys visit proplayerfoundation.org, www.proplayerfoundation.org, you'll see this photo novella project that I started working on. It is literally about 6 pages through pictures, what it was like in college, to fast forwarding to what I have now, which is I'm married, I have a wife, I have 3 children, I have erectile dysfunction. Y'all, I have MS. And the goal is for people to see the transition of my life so that you can know, it's still possible. Because I feel like those are the words that our people need to hear more than anything. With MS, whatever you desire still out of life, y'all, it is possible. And those things are the things that carry me through. So I love you all and I respect you all. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm so excited for what is to come with Miss Cynthia, who's going to come to the mic next. And so I'm excited to engage in this conversation. A true honor and what an amazing privilege.
Tyler, amazing as always. Thank you so much for sharing your MS journey with us. We truly appreciate it. Our last speaker for this evening is Cynthia. Having been diagnosed with MS in 2018, Cynthia became dedicated to learning as much as possible about MS in the African American community and founded the African American Resources for MS. Cynthia, welcome.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us tonight to learn a little bit about MS, our diagnosis, and how we handled it pretty much. And I will say, first off, my hat's off to those who have MS. If you were newly diagnosed, it's not an easy thing to sit and hear any of this because I do remember very clearly the day that I was diagnosed, but it started long before the diagnosis that I experienced symptoms, crazy symptoms that as a Black woman, older, having learned now in hindsight that at some point between 20 and 40 years of age, that's when you typically find out that you have MS. My being well into the 50s at that point, there's no way I could have MS. So I accepted everything that was told to me by every doctor, every nurse, every emergency room, urgent care, every person that I spoke with about my symptoms, everywhere from numbness, tingling, to headaches and tripping, falling, having the balance problems, cognition, things like that. And being told that it's an angry nerve, perhaps, or maybe just migraines, to you're getting older, and so forth and so on, as I'm sure some of you may have heard as well. But after being persistent about getting help and someone needing and wanting to take the time to hear me, again, being a Black woman, and it may not happen for some of you or people that you know who have been diagnosed with MS, but I always got the sense when I told my story to my doctors that I was brushed off. It was swept under the rug. And it just was not acceptable to me. And that's why I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. But the biggest doctor of all in my life at that time was my mother, because she never got tired, never got weary, never stopped running from doctor to doctor to doctor with me. My family, my husband, my siblings, my wonderful daughter and son in law never stopped listening to my complaints about what was going on in my body, which was very foreign to me. So it's hard to tell someone the same story over and over again and expect them to be patient and hear what you're saying and get a better outcome for what you're feeling. Nonetheless, I was finally diagnosed. And when the doctor said to me, "You have more lesions on your brain than we can count," again, I'm in my 50s, well into my 50s at that time, had just gotten married to a wonderful man, expecting a grandchild that I was ecstatic about, my first, and at this point, my only. Um, I just didn't understand this. And I said to him, "Are you sure?" Now, I'm a little bit nosy. I will research things. And as I was feeling these symptoms, I started to research, what illness can I have? What can this be? And I came across an article about MS. But because I read that it typically impacts people of white descent and European areas, so it can't be MS. So even I dismissed that. However, I'm not a doctor. I am not the expert in this area. So someone I felt should have seen some of the signs then. So, of course, going by my own knowledge at that time, I told my doctor, this can't be true. I'm Black, I'm older, past 40, and I don't have MS. It's something else. You have to find out what this is. And not to prolong my story, I just want everyone to understand that I can perfectly identify with what Dr. Hunter explained. I was going through grief to the point that I would not accept what was being openly said to me by my doctor. The doctor said to my husband, "She's not listening. You have to talk to her. She's not accepting this." And it was true. I was not accepting it because you know what? Many of you don't know me, but I'm a boss by nature. And I'm thinking, if I'm a boss, I can't possibly have this because that means I'm going to have to follow instructions. I'm going to have to take all types of medications. I can't live that life that I've worked so hard to have. And that bothered me so much that I could not accept the diagnosis. So I went through that grief period. And I never understood that grief could exist in anything other than death. But I was actually going through death, it felt like. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. I was afraid. I had my support system around me, but I felt lonely. I didn't know what to do next. I was working in corporate America and I had approximately 35 people reporting to me. So I was accustomed to having everyone come to me with problems. I was the problem solver. So what happens now? Who's going to solve this problem? I can't solve it myself. So I'm not the boss that I think I am, is how I felt at the time. But thank God that I was able to research information. Now, it didn't pertain specifically to African Americans, but it was helpful. And thank goodness for the Multiple Sclerosis Society and MSAA that they did have articles that were directed to African Americans with multiple sclerosis. But of 90% of the information I came across, maybe 20% would help an African American living with MS. So I was discouraged by that. So out of that was born an organization that I put together because I didn't know which way to turn. And I said, you know what? This is bad enough that you have to grieve. It's bad enough that you're afraid. It's bad enough that you don't know what's going to happen next. Is this the end of my life? What medication am I going to have to take? What about all the plans that I have? What about somebody else that have it? As Tyler so poignantly mentioned, I don't know if there's anybody that looks like me that can tell me about this disease, and I'm not finding anyone. I did more and more research. I started to attend more and more webinars. I signed up for more than I can count, uh, different clinical trials and things of that nature. But even in that, I found that I was the only African American in many of them. I said, something's wrong with this picture. Where are my people? I don't get it. They were all very kind, helpful, and supportive people, but I wanted to see someone like me there. I wanted someone who could relate to what I was going through so that I don't feel like I'm crazy. Why do I have all these symptoms? And some of the symptoms are those that are not experienced by Caucasians or other groups. So for me, I just wanted to connect with something or someone. Out of that, I created ARMS. It's African American Resources for Multiple Sclerosis. And you have to pardon me, but I have MS brain and speech. So please forgive me. I ask you for that in advance if I delay a little. But at any rate, I did develop a website that offers resources to African Americans or anyone that is looking for information, but specifically for the Black community. I don't want anyone to feel lost and alone as I did when I was diagnosed. My website actually lays it all out for you. Doctors, exercise, diet, nutrition, mental health, cooling products, you name it, it's there. And it's simply because I don't want the next person who's diagnosed to go through what I went through if I can help them. Now, the boss that I told you I was, that I felt like I took that over again. I'm in charge of this thing. I have to make sure that I'm feeding the people information so that it can help them. So MS didn't win with me. You may get me down. Sometimes MS, but most times I think about what I feel my calling is. I've always been a person to help, but I'm ill. How do I help now? This is how I help. I'm separating myself. I have MS. It doesn't have me. Therefore, I'm in control. I'm the boss of MS. And I'm going to do what I want, when I can, as I can, and go on with my life and fulfill my destiny that I feel I've been called to do. One of the ways I can do that is every day I recite to myself out loud, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, which comes from a scripture from the Bible. And it helps me. When I can't get out of the bed, I say it over and over and over again until my feet hit the floor. When I can't walk and I need my cane, I say it over and over again. So I may be walking with the cane, but you know what? I'm accomplishing the goal that I've set forth. And for that reason, I know that I can overcome this disease. I can't change it. There is no cure, but there's a lot of information and resources out there that tell me how I can cope with it. So I will end here and just say to those who have been recently diagnosed that you don't have to be afraid. You are not alone. There are support groups. There is information out there. Build yourself a healthy community of medical professionals to help you in every aspect of your needs, and you will get through. Don't feel bad on the days that you can't go anymore. You stop when you need to stop. You sit when you need to sit. You be quiet when you need to be quiet. And on those days that you're feeling good, live your life to the fullest, because this is not the end. After all, we all, at some point in our lives, are going to have to deal with something. If you keep living, you will deal with something. And we don't get to choose what it is. So MS has been chosen for us, and we have to make the best of it. It's enough that it's stolen so much from us. Don't let it steal your entire life. It's unfair, and it's not up to MS. That's all up to the man upstairs. So I wish you all the best. I wish you nothing but health and love. Please visit my website and just send me a chat if you ever need someone to talk to, listen to you, or to pray with you. And I'm happy to do so. And remember to take life one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time when you have MS. And I thank you so much for listening. And I'll turn the mic over to Marie.
Thank you so very much, Cynthia, for sharing your personal MS journey with us. We greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So once again, thank you, Dr. Hunter. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Cynthia, for your very informative presentation, for sharing your journeys with us. Your stories are absolutely phenomenal. And I am most certain that it's going to help someone who's going through something similar as you did and as you are. So now we are so delighted to have you be a part of this program. And since identity is unique and individual and an important part of a person's journey with MS, I would like to welcome you all together for tonight's panel discussion to expand on what we just learned. So, Dr. Hunter, thank you for your explanation of identity as it relates to MS within the African American Black community. Cynthia and Tyler, you're both amazing advocates and leaders in the MS community. Was there anything that Dr. Hunter described that resonated with how you think of your identity? And we'll start with you, Cynthia.
Yes, Marie, I'd have to say that my identity is I'm a person living with MS, but I'm also a fighter against MS. It's caused me to become an advocate, to learn all that I can, and not to see myself as just this individual who's here to do nothing. I'm here for a purpose, and I feel that that purpose is to help those who may not be as strong to get through MS. And that's how I'm identified at this point. It's funny that most times I go to the MS center, I was the baby in the group, and now I'm the one to encourage people of color, people of all races and denominations about how they can get through coping with this disease. So that's how I believe I'm identified now, as the helper with MS, for people with MS.
Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
Tyler. What are
There we
your
go,
thoughts,
ladies. I'm
Tyler?
sorry.
All right.
It's good. That was hitting the wrong. I kept hitting unmute. Yeah, like so for me, it was I refused to allow multiple sclerosis to engage in my own identity theft. And I want you to let that marinate on your cerebellum for a second. Don't let this disease, Tyler, take what the man up above blessed me with. Every single person who is listening in, you were like me, yo, you were blessed with something. There are some individuals here who write, who sing, who dance, who do whatever. You have something that is unique and special to you. And a lot of times, I heard people, Cynthia, like they would come and they would do barbershop talk. And I remember sitting in the chair, getting a tape of fade in the barbershop. Fellas, y'all know how it go. And every Saturday, somebody gonna come in there singing they shoulda, coulda, wouldas of what they used to be, of what they once were. And I refuse to let that be my talk with MS. I will not lose my identity, who the man up above created me divinely to be. Now, yes, it may take me longer to get to that destination, and I may have to go the hard, unfair, unjust route to get there. But guess what? If I choose that route, somebody's going to be there to help me get along the path because I'm open my heart and I'm obedient to what I've been blessed with, my identity. And so I just want to encourage people, don't allow yourself to go through the ups and downs of identity theft with this disease from beginning to end, and be open to having a new direction for the course that you have, the calling of your heart. If you love to sing, don't let singing go anywhere. If you like to read, keep picking up the books. But don't let this thing, don't let the doctor's office, don't let the way of the world tear you away from who you were created divinely to be. Because here's the deal. If you're a writer and you don't write those books, there's some people in the world who are waiting to read your work and they won't get it because you didn't believe in who you were and you let your identity be stolen. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you
I
so
really,
much, Tyler. Go ahead,
Maria, I'm
Dr.
just gonna
Hunter.
say, I really love that because I hear in both Tyler and Cynthia's story the recapturing and re-envisioning of that identity. You know,
Mhm.
when Cynthia said, I was a boss, and for a minute, I wavered, like maybe I'm not a boss. She said, nope, I'm a boss. Tyler is, it's that same thing. It's that um, really grabbing the pieces of identity that are salient, that are important. Those don't go away, and just maybe we need to revision what the path looks like in the context of MS. But the self is the same. So I really love what they've shared.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for adding to that. Okay, so Dr. Hunter, you spoke about the concept of grief as it relates to an MS diagnosis. And it's an interesting concept. And as you mentioned, everyone's experience with grief is going to be different as it relates to an MS diagnosis. And it's unique to each person. So I can imagine that there are many people listening in this evening that have experienced grief. And for the whole panel, is there anything about grief as it relates to living with MS that perhaps surprises you or has surprised you in the past? And we'll start with Tyler on that one.
I think for me, my MS, it revealed who I am at my core as a human being. It really and truly revealed what matters most to me in life, how I view people, what makes Tyler happy. Because those are the things that I fell on in the times of loneliness when no one
Mhm.
was around. Um, what mattered most to Tyler and what made me whole. And those are the things that I was surprised by, I guess. And they were also the things that allowed me to smile in moments
Mhm.
when they even surprised me. During those times of down, I just never would have thought that me being an introverted person, there was a level of resiliency that came with that. I didn't know what existed until the grief started to set in. That that not willing to quit, that this life is more about others than it is about myself. Having an attitude of selflessness instead of selfishness, having a heart of service. Those were thoughts that popped in my head in my most down times of loneliness and brokenness.
Mhm.
I never would have thought. And so those are the things that I fell back on that gave me a newfound direction. There was the brokenness, but there was also that small glimmer of light that you have to search for that created a whole a whole lane for me and my MS diagnosis to fit into.
Cynthia, did you have any thoughts? Thank you, Tyler.
Yes, actually, as Tyler was speaking, I was thinking about what was so surprising to me during my grieving period. And make no mistakes about it, there is no beginning and end of that. There's a beginning, but there's no end to that grief. that I've seen.
Mhm.
I have a lot of days where I grieve all over again. But what's surprising to me is that I'm able to pick myself up even in that grief period. I'm able to go on. And I would never have imagined that I could do that. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to have the bad days. My sister tells me all the time, look, you're not Superwoman. I know you think you are, but it's okay. So when I have those days of grieving, I'm surprised that I still can pick myself up and get dressed and go on and do those wifely duties and those motherly duties and be that daughter that I'm supposed to be. And people are depending on me. So go ahead and
Mhm.
grieve, but at some point, you got to pick yourself up. And more times than not, I feel better after I've pushed myself. But I'm very surprised by that. My thought of grief is shut down. Get under the
Mhm.
covers, pull it up to your eyes, don't talk to anybody, shut down
Mhm.
everything in the house. That was my thinking of grief prior to being diagnosed. But now I'm very surprised to know that you can go through that and still get through and not be sorry about it.
Okay. Thank you. So, Dr. Hunter, did you have any thoughts that you'd like to share?
I do, Marie. In the Black community, I think we have such a resilient and strong community, um, because you know, historically, we've been through a lot. But because of that, sometimes I think we have defined these very strict periods where we can grieve. So, Cynthia mentioned like death. Okay, you can grieve then, but not long.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, I think in our culture, we don't give ourselves space and permission to grieve when there's something to grieve. And an MS diagnosis, especially at the beginning, is something to grieve. Um, Sometimes our restriction of those emotions are when we push away that grief, when we don't want to deal with it, it makes that grief deeper. We sink deeper into that loneliness, into that brokenness. Um, but when we don't push it away, when we give ourselves permission to feel the bad feelings, permission to cry, as Cynthia just said, that's when that glimmer of hope that Tyler referred to um, comes up, right? Because we are fully owning our entire emotional experience. And then we can reach for support. And that's oftentimes when people know to support us, because they see, okay, there's something here. Let me reach in and help. And so when we put down that Superwoman, Superman complex that a lot of us carry around with us and allow ourselves to grieve is really when we can experience healing.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Hunter. Okay, so before we have a couple minutes before turning it over to our audience for Q&A, so I wanted to ask really quickly, thinking back, and this is for everyone, thinking back to when you first joined the MS community, what is perhaps the one message of reassurance that you can share with yourself then? Is there perhaps a mantra of words of encouragement that you live by? I know, Cynthia, you mentioned Philippians 4:13. Is there anything else that you can share? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Cynthia.
Well, I mean, there's many things, but I guess the only other thing that I will add is that I say you're only the best person that you can be if you make yourself that person. Nobody can do it for you.
Mhm.
And I typically live by that. You can stop and nobody's going to push you because you're not well and they feel they're pushing too much and they don't want to push. So you have to push yourself to be all that you want to be and to do all that you want to do. So that's what I do daily. Even when I don't feel like it, I push myself. So between that and Philippians 4:13, it gives me enough strength, energy, and the fortitude to go forward.
Okay. Tyler, one thing that you can perhaps share.
Your story matters. Our stories matter. And your story, your MS journey, everybody, like your life is a best written novel yet to be published. because I feel like at times we diminish our own sense of self-worth, value, and being. And you can meet so many different faces with MS, some of which that don't look like ours. And you can compare yours to somebody else. No, 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 no. Don't do that. Your MS is your MS. So you got to own that and understand that what you've gone through and the questions that you have or the uncertainties that you are feeling, the vulnerability that you want to go through, the transparency that you're nervous about, it matters. And so the more that you can engage with somebody to reveal those things, it will only help you further. But your life a best yet to be a best written. Oh, excuse me, I can't say it. I'm having MS brain like Cynthia. It is a yet to be written best selling novel. There we go, Cynthia. Your MS journey
You got
matters. It
Well,
matters.
thank you both so much. So, Dr. Hunter, we're going to switch really quickly over to a couple Q&As that I want to get in before we end the program this evening. So this question is for you. Dr. Hunter, you mentioned that you can go through some or all of the stages of grief and that the journey through grief can be different for everyone. Sometimes I think I've reached acceptance, but then it slips away and I feel like I'm back at square one. Is there anything I can do to help stay in the acceptance phase longer? How do I make it stick?
Oh, that is a really good question. I would encourage us to rethink about the stages of grief, not as a square one, and let's not
Mhm.
think of acceptance as the end goal, but let's think of this as a journey and a process. And what may be most helpful is to think through what's shifting you back into the stages of grief. And are there things to address, to work through, to reach out for support, to get into therapy? You know, what shifts you back into those more uncomfortable stages of grief? You're not going backwards. You're not to square one. You're just in a different phase of your journey, and you may need different support in that phase. So I hope that helps to sort of rethink about, um, when we move through those waves of grief and when those waves feel higher versus when they feel lower.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. Okay, so the next one that we have, and I know we're coming up on time here, but I'll try to get in as many as I can. So now this question for for Cynthia and Tyler, as well as a follow-up question for you, Dr. Hunter. Um, I was diagnosed with MS a couple of decades ago, and I found as time has gone on that my experience of how I accept or don't accept my MS diagnosis has changed. For Cynthia and Tyler, has how has your acceptance or has you, okay, let me rephrase this question. Have you accepted your diagnosis change over time? So as your diagnosis have changed, how do you accept it over time?
Cynthia.
And we can go
Tyler,
with,
you want to
Go
go?
ahead,
go ahead.
Cynthia. Go ahead, Cynthia. I'm from the
Okay.
South. It's ladies first, honey. You know the deal.
You're such a gentleman. Thank you. I will say that at one point it did waver. It went back and forth. And I finally got to a stage where I said, you know what? This is what it is. It is what it is, as they say, and I can't change this. But you certainly go through a stage where you accept it, and then maybe weeks, months later, you say, wait a minute, there's no way I can have this. You get angry. You want to hit somebody. You're so angry about it. You think about, as Dr. Hunter said, what did I do or what didn't I do? So you go back and forth and then you come to grips with it again. So I thought I was losing my mind because I thought I was there already. I went down this road. Why am I back here again? And it went on for some time. I was very angry. Then I was very sad. But I finally got to a place of peace where I accept it. I can't promise that it's going to always be this way. But again, it is what it is. And I will have to deal with those days where I'm not accepting it as they come. I'm not looking forward to that, and I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, I'm prepared to deal with it all over again. So take your time and do what you need to do to get through, and don't feel bad about it.
Tyler, do you have
I
anything
second.
to add?
Yeah, I
You
second that,
second?
and I'll keep it 100 and get to it. So I went through the wave. I think being an athlete was the thing that saved me, but it also crippled me because I was still able to play the game. I could still do all the things I needed to do with MS,
Hmm.
graduate, do all those things. And then, so in the beginning, I felt like, what is this thing? I don't even have to worry about it. Give myself my medicine and I go about my business. I never learned how to take care of myself. None of that. It was play football, go to school. I can do those things. Don't worry about it. It caused me to internalize everything. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't tell coaches about it. Um, then when I started having more and more relapses, when pro football was taken away, when that was not an option, you were forced to come to grips like this thing ain't going nowhere, TC. You got to settle down and start taking this thing seriously. Your body's your temple, let it be. And so I feel like if I could equate it to an emotional roller coaster, that is a
Hmm.
constant series of highs and lows in terms of looking this thing in the eye and coming to terms with it. And then I ride that wave. And then there's the thoughts of who can you get married with this disease? What woman
Hmm.
wants to marry somebody who has all this baggage? Um, then you meet that person, then you get married, and then you have kids, and then you feel invisible. But then it's like I'm getting older now. I'm 34. I was 21 when I started. Now my wife and I have to have conversations like, "Baby, I'm tired today," or having to
Hmm.
explain to my children like, "I can't necessarily go outside with you right now." And having to really come more and more to grips like this is what you have to live with for the rest of your life. So there's
Hmm.
always humbling experiences, gentle reminders, and it's an emotional roller coaster of ups and downs, honestly, with me.
Okay. Thank you, Tyler. And Dr. Hunter, do you find that the way people view or accept their MS diagnosis changes over time?
Absolutely. I think Cynthia and Tyler both spoke to that beautifully. Um, MS is a disease that changes over time, and there are periods when, um, you know, is this here at all? And there are periods that
Hmm.
are really hard. Um, there are periods that feel really scary, and periods where you may be symptomatic, but you're not scared about it. I know what this is. I know this symptom. I know how to cope and deal.
Hmm.
And so it does change. Um, but it's not the acceptance necessarily that's changing. It's just a renegotiation of that relationship with MS. How do I understand myself? How do I understand my environment right now? Um,
Hmm.
and when we practice that mindfulness, that living in the present moment, that leaning into support, that seeking therapy and care as we need it, those things can help us ride those waves when we're renegotiating what it means to have MS.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hunter. So, as we come to a close, what is perhaps a word or a saying that inspires you daily on your MS journey? And we can start with you, Tyler.
When one door closes, another one opens. That's it.
Beautifully said. Cynthia?
Resilience, resilience. You have to be resilient with this disease. Don't give up, don't give in.
Thank you. And Dr. Hunter?
Living well is intentional.
Mm,
You know, your physical wellness is intentional. Your mental wellness is intentional. Your spiritual wellness is intentional. So just remembering to set out to live well every day and be intentional about what that looks like for you.
beautifully said. Thank you all so very much. Thank you so much. Yes, definitely, Tyler. Absolutely. Drop the mic. You all were phenomenal. I want to thank you so much again, Dr. Hunter. Thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you so much, Cynthia,
You're
for
welcome.
sharing Yes, for sharing your MS journey with us. This has been such an amazing and insightful discussion, and I wish we could take even more time because I know there's so much more that we can go into and talk about, but we're short on time, so we'll have to do this again. I feel inspired and reassured by what you've shared this evening, and I'm hoping and I know that this will help someone who's currently listening. So now this concludes the second webcast in our New Direction series. Tonight's webinar was recorded and will be made available on our website at mymsaa.org. Please do visit MSAA's calendar of events for our upcoming educational programs. On behalf of MSAA, we would like to thank Genentech and Johnson & Johnson for making this program possible, as well as our virtual display hall sponsors, Biogen, Genentech, and Sanofi Genzyme. Thank you once again to Dr. Hunter, Tyler, and Cynthia for the amazing presentations, and to Tyler and Cynthia for sharing their MS journeys with us. We truly appreciate you. We would also like to thank our partners at Impact Education in delivering this program. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Please consider completing the brief survey that immediately follows this slide, and know that we are thinking of the entire MS community and hope that you and your families continue to stay safe. Thank you and have a wonderful night.
That concludes today's presentation. Thank you for joining us. Please follow the link in the prompt to be redirected to the participant evaluation form.